Present, I'll call to order the May 8th meeting of the Historic Landmarks Commission. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Historic Landmarks Commission on any subject that's within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled on this agenda. Seeing no public, I will close public comment and go on to approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of April 24th, 2013.
So moved.
We have a motion by Lavoie.
Second.
Second by Winnick. Under discussion, any additions, corrections, or clarifications? Anything?
I was good with it.
I didn't see anything. No, they're good.
Another gold star for Ms. Feliciano.
Yes.
All in favor of approval? Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Lamone has some information.
Comments on the minutes? Okay.
Mr. Chair, if you could identify the item that was reviewed for 900 Channel Drive. I think it was the, can you look at item 5?
That was the
antenna.
Page 7.
Funny enough, that's the one that I thought I wasn't here for.
Page 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to inform the commission that we have attempted to clarify the compatibility analysis criteria discussions for projects over the past several years since this was adopted, to make it very clear that the intent behind these comments is to communicate your specific review of the project. In this particular case, what was probably not conveyed to you adequately is that the project was requesting a conditional use permit for the fact that it was over height for a residential zone. The antenna was exceeding 45 feet, and therefore over 45 feet is required to get a conditional use permit at the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission wants to know why you're suggesting that you can accept that pole. And I think in previous discussions on the item, you had pretty good discussion about why you thought a pole was adequate. What we thought was important is in the context of these compatibility criteria that you embellish why you thought it was compatible. Unfortunately, the discussion wasn't very clear, but I embellished the minutes, and I wanted to be upfront with you to carry forward your previous comments on the matter. In other words, I did not create anything new. You essentially walked through the compatibility criteria and said they were met, but you didn't explain fully why. So this is our staff's attempt to carry forward your previous comments and put it in the context of this compatibility criteria and explain to the Planning Commission why you think the pole is compatible with that area. So I wanted to clarify that issue. And then secondly, indicate to you in the future, as it is outlined today in the agenda, you have projects that will say compatibility criteria analysis required. What we would like you to get into the habit of, and this is part of this whole thing of making correct motions, is to look at this criteria and say, we think it's in compliance with our guidelines because it has a good design. It meets most of our design guidelines. Or we think it's compatible for the neighborhood because there are consistency, it's consistent with the neighborhood. So walk through those specific and explain why you think it, because you're communicating to the Planning Commission or the staff hearing officer why you think the project should be approved. And consequently, if you don't think something is totally met, you can also indicate that. We think the landscaping should be more embellished. That's still something that could be resolved later when it comes back.
Okay, so if I'm reading through the motion, 1 through 6 are what you embellished.
To some degree, I just added statements to to explain why those compatibility criteria could be made, and took them from previous comments that you had on the project.
Right. Commissioner Rios?
My recollection is Mr. Lavoie made statements regarding the fact that alternatives to the pole were more intrusive, and this was the least of the issues.
Odious.
Thank you.
I don't know what I did. What
I
does
don't
it
know.
say?
I don't know
Here
if
it
you
says,
put-
based on previous comments, so that would be Mr. Lavoie's comments, the project design is acceptable because the applicant has pursued a design in its simplicity to minimize the impacts of the installation.
Gee,
The
you sound good.
monopole is the least intrusive design. So that covers that.
Yeah, it
Okay.
sounded good.
That
But
covers-
that was a very
That's the
cutting
essence.
point as far as I was concerned as to
And
why
I thought that was
it would
important for
fit
the
in.
planning
And
commission
then,
to listen to
and he
that.
said it well.
Commissioner Drury?
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
The monopole's height was determined to be the least intrusive because the shorter the poles, you need more, right? They stack those receivers,
Well, they stack them on the pole.
and they get them fatter. It gets fatter and fatter and more visually intrusive.
No, not necessarily.
that's what I
If it was lower, I think they would be extending them outward
That's what
from
I
the
mean.
pole. Okay, so the mass of the structure would.
I don't remember the height being told to us as being an issue in meeting.
No, the height was not told to us
Well,
as
I'm
an
Well,
issue.
how about we say this?
We
Then I
were
think
sort of told this is the height that's going to be.
Yes, you're correct.
I'll clarify.
we have actually Commissioner Schallenberger first, then Commissioner Winnick.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've addressed sort of the general design compatibility, but specifically if height is the issue, we should pass along a comment to Planning Commission specifically why this exception would be acceptable. And I think it's a mass, bulk, and scale comprehensively. If you have a small footprint that extends over the 45 feet, it's not the same as having a 100-foot by 100-foot footprint going over 45 feet.
Sort of
So
mass bulk
this
and scale.
massing, this relative mass makes this acceptable.
If I can comment also, I mean, when you look at the zoning standards, you reduce these heights based on the residential feel and character of a neighborhood.
Right, and I was
Here
going
you-
to get to that, I think.
Here you have a different
Commissioner Winnick, do you mind
situation.
if I just add something before you comment?
Go for it.
This might put it to bed. So under comment number 2, the project size, mass, bulk, and height and scale are appropriate for its location in neighborhood and do not adversely affect the height ordinance of the neighborhood or zone.
I would add something to that, though.
Okay?
It's generally creating its own setback as well. So this where the height occurs on the site is within the so far set back from the property line boundaries that it doesn't have the kind of impact that height at property lines would have.
Commissioner Winnick?
Well, I don't know if it's set back that far. I was just going to say, the issue of height did come up, and when we asked if it could be lower, they said, well, then we would be asking for more of these, that the height is relative to the spacing of how frequent they need to have them. So just so you know, at the time, we all were like, well, we don't want more of these. So we were willing to accept the height, assuming we wouldn't be getting more coming. And one of the commissioners asked, in fact, well, can you get everybody's on this so that way we wouldn't have to deal with somebody else making an application for another repeater tower nearby, just in case everybody wants to know. So I wouldn't change. I think the motion as you've got it is fine.
Commissioner Rios?
As I recall, they had tried to contact the country club to have it in the attic, and they had no response. One of the things that was very important was that there was a condition that it be removed if it was not deemed necessary in the future. And I don't know if that condition,
It does, because it says carry forward previous comments to the
so
planning commission.
that is going to be there.
We'll make the planning commission aware
Yeah.
of that concern.
Okay.
Okay, so anybody else have anything to add to this?
Can you repeat it when you're done?
Okay.
Yeah.
I am going to suggest that we accept number 1, and I'll read it. Based on previous comments, the project design is acceptable because the applicant has pursued a design in its simplicity to minimize the impacts of the installation. The monopole is the least intrusive design. Number 2, the project size, mass, bulk, height, and scale are appropriate for its location and neighborhood and do not adversely affect the neighborhood or the zone. Okay. The project design is appropriately sensitive to adjacent federal, state, or city landmarks or other nearby designated historic resources, including city structures of merit, sites, or natural features. Number 4, public views of the ocean and mountains are not greatly impacted. Number 5, appropriate amount of open space and landscaping are sufficient. Number 6, carry forward previous comments from the Planning Commission. Is everyone okay with those? More or less? Okay. So then we have a motion and a second to accept the minutes as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Commissioner Murray abstains. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Ms. Gantz?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item A at 1117 State Street was project design approval and final approval as noted. Item B at 901 North Milpa Street was continued 2 weeks. Item C at 25 East De La Guerra Street was indefinitely continued. Item D at 1604 Olive Street was final approval as submitted of the review after final. And those were, the first 3 items were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp, with item D reviewed by Chair Suding.
I have a motion to ratify the consent calendar.
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion by Lavoie, second by Drury. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is announcements.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Boucher will be absent, and Chair Suding will step down from item 5 at 902 Chapala Street. And then the last item on the agenda, item 7 at 1601 State Street, has been postponed indefinitely at the applicant's request.
I'm sorry, which one?
Which one's the last item?
The last item, item 7 at 1601 State Street. Thank you.
Commissioner Schallenberger, I don't know. Do you need to step down on item 5? 902 Chapala? No. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
there is an element being circulated regarding safety, I believe, Mr. Lamone. You might want to mention to the group, the commissioners, because everything is tied together. A safety in a neighborhood determines how a neighborhood functions, and it is an integral part of preservation and things like this. And this might be something that the commission wants to review and look at.
That is correct, Commissioner. We do have a period for comment of 30 days.
23rd of this month.
Right. And if you would like, we could have it forwarded to you so you could peruse at your leisure if you'd like to comment, or
Also-
assign somebody to review it for the
Also, I
commission.
understand that the city council is now working on something regarding safety and evacuation, which
I'm not-
also affects,
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
can
but we
affect our landmarks and things like that in the fire hazard zone and things like that. We might want to also look at that.
I could certainly look into that.
Why don't you forward the
Link.
the material to myself and Commissioner Arias, and we'll take that so we don't burden the rest of the commission with the review of that.
Okay.
I'm getting, they have a copy for me upstairs.
Okay. If you would send me the link and just copy Commissioner Arias.
I'll pick up the copy today.
Okay. Any other announcements? Okay, we have an announcement from Nicole Hernandez. Ms. Hernandez?
I just wanted to remind you all that we are having 2 meetings for the public about potential historic districts this week. The first one is tomorrow, May 9th at 5:30 here in the Gephardt Room. And the second one will be Saturday, May 11th at 10 in the Faulkner Gallery. And
What time is it?
10 a.m. And the other announcement I wanted to make is that
Hold on that for a second. Just to follow through, I believe we have commissioners from the commission that are going to be attending those.
We do.
Okay.
Commissioner Murray, Commissioner Drury, and Commissioner Winnick. will
Thank
be
you.
all attending.
Thank you.
Although I'm only attending on Saturday, but Nicole knows that.
But thank you, you 3 commissioners, for doing that.
Yeah. And we also wanted to let you know that El Encanto will be going to City Council for its final landmark designation hearing on June
Great.
18th.
Great.
June 18th.
June 18th.
June 18th? Yes.
For what?
Final designation.
Final landmark designation hearing.
Are there any other projects or items before council or planning commission that the Historic Landmarks Commission should be aware of? Mr. Lamone? Ms. Gantz? Ms. Hernandez? No?
Not that I know of.
Commissioner Murray, please.
I just want to announce that
Could we have the table camera, please?
Birthday Society's home tour is a tour of the adobes. It's going to be on May 19th, 2000. May 19th is this Preservation Month. Encourage everybody to attend, and you can open it and see some of the samples of that.
So that's on May 19th. It's from 11 to 4 p.m.
Tickets are going on sale now. They usually sell out, so please buy your tickets.
The contact phone number is 805-961-3938. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Murray. Any other announcements? Subcommittee reports, anybody? No? That was not a subcommittee designations. I think that was just to prime them for the workshops, the reviews. I have just a brief one. On Tuesday, the 7th, I attended a Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting. If you guys recall, I had asked that there be a co-designation of the Afrocarpus on East 200 block of East Cannon Perdido as it related to the project that's there on the corner of Bath and East Cannon Perdido. The street west, thank you, beg your pardon, west. The Street Tree Advisory Committee was going to review that request. However, unbeknownst to me at the time I made that request, there are high voltage wires above the street tree planters. So since the Afrocarpus is a tall tree, it may not pass muster. So when you see that next, it may not have an Afrocarpus. All right, next item on the agenda is item 1. It's a discussion item. I remind the Commission that we are 3 minutes behind. Mr. Lamone, this is on a city budget priority.
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Lamone, Senior Planner. This item was placed on the agenda at your request, and what I wanted to remind you is that, as the city planner explained to you, the city is already recommending specific measures to be funded as part of the discussions at City Council. What was asked of you was to also indicate if you supported other additional funding support for stipends and possibly funding for zoning enforcement. And at that time, I think all of you raised questions about whether or not there should be some additional funding request on this surplus money that Council will consider, I believe, on June 4th. So that's the purpose of today's discussion. I had a quick discussion with the chair about staff's idea about additional funding, and I'm willing to share that with you.
Please, no, I think you'll do far better synopsis than I will.
Well, going back to discussions that we've had with this commission starting back in 2007, when we started talking about goals, 5-year goals, I looked at the type of efforts that we were beginning to discuss, and 2 stood out. One was specific to the time frames. You requested that we place the goals in sort of time frames, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and long term. And one of the things that we were explaining is how important it was to complete the survey efforts. And we've made tremendous progress in the last several years using interns. And interns is just a reality now with us budgeting shortbacks and cutbacks the last several years. We are doing a lot of work with paid and unpaid interns. We had a paid intern to do the work on the survey efforts, Sergei Startsev, and his funding has expired. And it's pretty difficult to get him to come in to do it unpaid because it's very technical. But he is so committed, he has come in unpaid. I feel that's an unfair thing to ask somebody to do. And for that reason, I've continued discussions with the Pearl Chase Society about having them try to fund that. We were there approximately about a year ago asking them to fund the website enhancements. Now that we have the website enhancements technically funded, there's still that shortage of interns. And I know Nicole can speak to how effective interns are in getting her work advanced. We're doing a lot of work on our design guidelines with one of our interns out of Cal Poly, and we can see that, just direction to these folks to do things can forward our mission, which is to increase the time or improve the time to complete these guidelines, as well as we've had some help on designations using interns. So that was also one of your goals, to increase the number of designations. Just to let you know that our intent is to try to double our efforts that we've had, and that was 3 per year. We're trying to do a designation effort at the beginning of the year and towards the end of the year, and try to do 6 per year. I am asking you that if we have interns, it will be a lot easier given all the things that are on Nicole's plate. So that's something that I would like to have you consider.
Well, I think the commission also realizes that in just the last few months, we've had probably 4 designations. And a large part of that is due to the urban historian, Nicole Hernandez. But I know that Nicole could not have done that without her interns and the people that she relies on in that respect. So, and this is just, my opinion, but to me, I would rather forego the stipend if we could hire more interns. I know that everybody on this commission doesn't feel that way, and not everybody has the same sort of constraints or requirements. We have some people driving a long distance to get here, but in my mind, the greater good of getting the designations, and we have that momentum now, outweighs the benefit of personally me getting the stipend. So I guess I could donate my stipend to the city to hire an intern or something, but I sort of wanted to throw that out to the commission, and maybe it's not just a stipend or nothing. It's, what I want to hear from the commission. How does the commission feel that the city should budget or prioritize their budget? Commissioner Murray, want to weigh in?
I guess I am just really wanting this momentum going, right? We are doing the historic districts. The big push after that is going to come up with design guidelines to go with those historic districts. These kind of work take a lot of time and money, and and Nicole has these tremendous interns, and why I just want the money to go and facilitate all that work while we have this opportunity that may not come around again. So I don't want the stipend for myself.
If the Pearl Chase Society were to still pursue a donation or a funding of a project, it was my understanding that if they were to do that, that they would want the city to match that funding. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The last discussion I had last year was that they were interested in having the city match the funds to make a commitment. It's our belief that we have made that commitment, that we actually had some funds due to salary savings to keep these interns on for approximately another year. One of them is paid, 2 are unpaid at the moment. With respect to what our position would be, the city is coming up with $30,000. We were asking them to fund the web enhancement. Unfortunately, the $30,000 is spread over 2 years, and so the initial year is going to be for the web enhancement, not for hourly. So what we're talking about really is whether this commission wants to go on record and maybe write a memo to City Council or appear before City Council and say, this is our position on the matter. We support additional funding, surplus funding, either for stipends, or we would like to have this money directed with additional funding for hourly support. Council has a budget proposal and recommendation from our department that does not include hourly funding. It does include additional funding for zoning enforcement. That was one of the things that was discussed at our budget presentation that we,
Last Tuesday.
right, last Tuesday, that there is the stipends money and this hourly funding for additional zoning enforcement. And that was also supported by some of the board members that came and said, you all do a good job, but let's do the enforcement that also goes hand in hand with what you all do. So it's really, again, whether council will look at this pick list of items and decide whether the stipends should be funded or whether any additional request. And granted, this is going to be a late request. However, they need to hear from you as far as what you support or not
Okay.
support.
I'm going to start down the line then. Commissioner Schellenberger, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
No.
Commissioner Winnick?
I support the redirection of the funds towards what you guys have just outlined.
Okay. Commissioner Arias?
I will repeat what I've said, this will be the third time, that if you are itemizing your income tax and you are paid $1 by a company or a hospital or whatever, you can take your expenses that you incur, like mileage, time, etc., off as a business expense on your taxes. The city used to pay $1, and that if you are itemizing your taxes, that works as an attractive tax exemption, and it is also more than you would get for being taxed with the stipend. So that is something that this is the third time I've said it, and it hasn't registered with anybody, but it's a fact. I look at things as a balance, and I want to see the districts established and historic preservation enhanced in the city. And I see so many modifications being granted that undermine the districts and the neighborhoods that concerns me. And I would like to really see a tightening of the modification to make sure that they are not detrimental to future uses of or future establishments of the districts. I don't need the stipend myself. I would be happy to put it to wherever it would be most useful. But I do think that we need to look at the long picture and see that enforcement and keeping our neighborhoods intact, protecting them is important. I'm sorry.
No. When I look at the clock, I'm not making a statement. I'm just trying to keep time.
Well, I said it. But again, if you do it with $1, that is a business tax expense. And I don't know how many people itemize their taxes, but that's...
Well, I look for every deduction I can. So.
Yeah, well, I do too. And so I know that it is, I get more than I get it from the stipend, and I don't need the stipend.
Okay. Commissioner Lavoie?
Nothing further to add.
Commissioner Murray?
Nothing further to add. I just think for this time, I mean, stipend can be considered in the future, but I just think this time, for this year, for this budget, it's really important to let the city do the enforcement work and internship work.
I'm going to ask the questions. I'll get to you, Mr. Sharp. Commissioner Rios brings up a good point. Is there anything set in stone about the $50 stipend, or can that stipend change?
There could be an alternative proposal that would reduce, change, alter the way the stipends are
Commissioner
awarded.
Sharp?
I would give up the stipend if I was convinced that that money was going to be something that we really could see, and not just swallowed into the big morass.
Well, if I can comment on that, Mr. Sharp, the Pearl Chase Society specifically asked if they were to give a gift that we have a memorandum of understanding that specified reporting mechanisms to show that there in fact was money being spent for the specific goal. And I did commit to that. I gave them a draft MOU that would report that, and I could convey that to you, this commission also.
I would agree with that. Commissioner Drury?
I would agree with Commissioner Sharp, minus morass.
All right. Okay, so I think, Mr. Limon, you and I should sit down and draft a letter or a memo to City Council on budget priority. I have an understanding of where the Commission wants to go with their priority, and you have an understanding of how Council is going to receive that. So you let me know when you want to do that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
There's one last point I would like to make, is there are people in this community and on this board who have indicated to you that they would be very happy to volunteer their time. And while you talk about interns, there is the element of volunteers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming prepared to talk about it. Next item on the agenda is a historic structures report for 1807 Santa Barbara Street. This is the second review of a historic structures sites report prepared by Alexander C. Cole, Preservation Planning Associates. The report found that the building is not considered a historic resource. The report was last reviewed on April 24th, 2013. Ms. Hernandez.
I still support the report's conclusions that the project is in its current condition does not qualify as a historic resource.
Mr. Lamona, do you want to add anything?
Commissioners, what I wanted to do is, before we let Ms. Fermina comment, because I know she did some investigation on this matter, is to indicate the city's philosophy with respect to properties that are going to be reviewed in potential historic districts. That's one of our discussion items for our neighborhood meetings. How will the city treat these properties? And what I wanted to sort of convey to you is that we would like to have a simple review process that would allow our city historian to work with property owners to guide them towards the proposed solution that has the less impact to the district. And when we say less impact, it's not only to the specific resource, but to the streetscape. And to that end, we have developed Lower Riviera design guidelines for this special design district that... I'm in the wrong one. I'm sorry.
I was going to say.
Santa Barbara Street.
Maybe I should have paid attention. So,
Educational anyways.
can I back up? My backup behind my Well, it's similar discussion, actually.
I was going to say, so far you had me
is
for a while.
The similar discussion is that we take our reviews seriously with respect to making conclusions on significance, and to that end, our process is to first get a structures report and a recommendation from our city historian to evaluate that recommendation. And we as planning staff would be concerned if for some reason we are eliminating those opinions and not taking them specifically into consideration, because that's the premise of all our survey efforts. We do this every day, and our historians work to provide recommendations to you on significance levels. And so when a project comes to you and indicates with a structures report that it's not significant, and you disagree with that conclusion, it puts us in a situation where we have a disagreement between experts, and it's not an easy process to resolve. It typically involves having you either initiate the project towards a listing, which in this case would be the next step. If you disagree with the report and find that the structure was significant, we would ask that it be placed on the next agenda to be put on as a potential property. We're not recommending that, and I don't believe Ms. Hernandez is going to change her opinion based on some of the investigation that has occurred. So we put ourselves in a dilemma where this applicant could appeal this decision and have us go to City Council where staff disagrees with the commission. So I just wanted to point that out, that ideally we can have an agreement that the historians have done their work, and this commission, if they disagree, they need to specifically state why there's a disagreement on record.
I just wanted to add, too, to the commission. It's our job to review the report, and we have to ask ourselves if the report is fatally flawed or have some serious mistakes in it, and that's how we typically, would look at a report. Yes, Mr. Lamone is correct. If we don't accept the report, we have to state specifically why we don't accept that report. Okay? So with that, is there any more staff comment? No? Okay. Mr. Shields, did you want to make any presentation?
No, I think...
Okay, then I'll move on to public comment. Ms. Paula Westbury, we are acknowledging a written letter from Ms. Paula Westbury in opposition. Next person is Calum Deforest. Mr. Deforest.
Good afternoon. I hope most of you got my letter, email about the. I know Ms. Cole isn't here, but she complimented me on my research. She made an assumption that this mysterious fifth white brother that no one had ever heard of, or at least I'm sure lots of people had heard of him, but I was not aware of him. And is what was it? Norton Ruggie White was not the assumption that the house, the suite built by Mrs. Thomas White for her in her new house on her redone house on one at 807 Santa Barbara Street, that it was for his visit, but obviously he at the time was married and living in East Grand Rapids. So it is both from the city directory and the source and other sources, as I pointed out, it was Roderick White, the famous concert violinist that the suite was done for. So I think the Historic Structures Report presumptions are not correct and should be corrected. The question is, does the existence of does the fact that a famous person that fits category C would that change the conclusions of the report? And I think it would. And also, Commissioner Sharp has pointed out, and I didn't write down his name, the founder of Sambo's lived there too, and the Sambo's did make a impact on the creation and of the Sambo's restaurant chain did impact Santa Barbara too. So I cannot see why this cannot be on the potential list, and I don't see why being on the potential list would affect the minor changes that the applicant wishes to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deforest. See no other public. I'll close public comment and bring it to questions from the commission. Mr. Schallenberger, do you have any questions?
I have a question that's procedural, and I don't know how best to, if this is even time and place for it, but
let's try it out.
I don't understand if a project, if it doesn't matter, in other words, the project would have no impact on the resource, why the project can't go forward with or without the report's designation. In other words, the proposed project would probably, I'll just say that for COIA purposes, would probably be found to not have a significant impact on it if it were deemed a historic resource. So we have this thing that we're either accepting the report or we're not, but it's holding up the project, in my belief, unnecessarily. So I don't know procedurally how we deal with that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in order for it to be designated or on the potential list, we have to accept the report. Right? Go ahead,
well,
Mr. Lamone.
Let me clarify the city's review process. Because this property requires a zoning modification, it becomes a discretionary review project. Because it's a discretionary review project, we have to, an obligation under CEQA to determine if it's a historic resource. This is the question before you. Is it a historic resource or not? That's the first determination. And whether you accept the report or not, the question you should be asking is, should it be listed as a historic resource? Once you establish that question, it's really a question of the review body that's going to handle the situation or the project. And you're right, it's probably the project will be accepted either by this commission or the Single Family Design Board. So essentially, that's what you should decide today. Do you believe it's a historic resource? Once you do, and you actually move this project to this commission and have it listed on a following agenda as a potential resource, and this commission would look at the project. Okay. If you decide otherwise, this applicant would move forward to the Single Family Design Board.
Okay.
And we would obviously forward our comments on to the Single Family Design Review Board.
That makes sense.
Okay. Any questions from you, Commissioner Winnick?
No questions.
Commissioner Arias, any questions?
Question to Mr. Limon. How would you adjudicate this project with its neighborhood impacts?
The neighborhood compatibility question is a determination that this body would make, or the Single Family Design Board body would make. It's an NPO finding that would be required to be made from a compatibility standard. So if we typically review these projects and know it's consistent with the existing style, for example, there probably would not be an issue with respect to getting an approval. We have more controversy with a large addition or second-story addition where people question whether it's compatible with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Lavoy.
I thought we were here today actually to hear from Fermina, so I'd like to hear
I
from
just wanted to know if you have any questions.
No, I want to hear from Fermina first, and then I'll maybe have some questions.
Ms. Murray.
Well, I wasn't here, and I looked at the tapes of the meeting, and essentially the minutes said that for me to review the project. I received and reviewed all the correspondence from Calum, several correspondence from Alex Cole, and a telephone. I visited the site. I talked to Mark Seals. I also met with the owner and took a tour of the house today. Wow. And I really understand what the commission was wrestling, like Winnick and Lavoy, and because we have had two projects in that area that were restoration. You know, the mission revival home on Crocker Row was restored, and then the former Fielding house is being restored. So I can see why the commissioners are wanting to see that potential future restoration. But when I review let's take Calum's point about Roderick Stewart. I went to the Clare Hill Library, and I have all these studies which I didn't have a chance to digest and come up. And this is now. And Alex Cole also interviewed Roderick's son, and basically said that Roderick's son said, well, let me do my first before I go to Alex's. So this house was built in 1926. The mother lives there, and for exactly 3 years, 1926 to 1929. She died in 29. Mrs. White died in 1929. Now, Mr. Roderick is listed, as Calum pointed out. He lived there in 27, 28, and 29. Then in 29, he got married and got a home built for him designed by Plunkett at El Caserio at 924 Garden Street. Now,
Mr. Deforest,
he married in 1930 in the backyard of this house, 1926 house. it doesn't mean that he lived there. So when I look at all this, it's pretty hard for me to say that this house is associated with Roderick, because if you look at his house on El Caserio, he lived there for a long time. That is where he produced his music. There was an upstairs music room. There's a whole story about him, and he dies in 1945. There's all of his contributions to the community as a teacher, a music teacher, a famous artist was all done in that house. So that's one thing. Now Alex also reviewed Calum's research, and she interviewed the son of Roderick. And here's what she says. It says, Calum Deforest kindly sent me his research on the relationship of Roderick White to the house at 1807 Santa Barbara Street. I just talked with Roderick's son, Thomas, who was inclined to agree with Calum that the apartment in the house was for the bachelor Roderick and not Rugi, who was married and well ensconced in Grand Rapids in Michigan in 1926. According to Thomas, Roderick's mother was fairly controlling, making Roderick into a concert violinist by forcing him to practice 6 hours a day as a child and youth. He was a feather in her cap as a result, and she wanted to keep him close to her. He did not marry until 1930, after his mother died, and Thomas conjectured that if she had not died, she would have not approved him marrying. So if the mother did not die and the son lived in this house and did not get married and go live in El Caserio, yes, we can associate the house with him. But I just want to say that the house is very hard to conjecture that it is associated with him. So that was standard C that the commission was worrying about.
So basically what you're saying is that he really didn't live there by choice.
Yeah. So now the design of the house. When I saw the house, I agree with the report that these additions that were made to the house, the carport and the porte cochere, even if you remove the porte cochere for me, that carport really totally destroys the intent of the architect. It is really a seriously what I call a character-destroying addition. And it really, it takes away the integrity of the house. And so when we look at these things, although we are looking towards the future, I just feel that we as a commissions are looking at the present conditions today. And so I too agree with the report that those additions were pretty hard to support and say, because they really take away the integrity of the house. And so here's my offer to the commission. What I saw in the property is there's a sandstone in front of the property that wraps around all the way around to Islay. That to me is historic. And there's also one tree. I think it's an oak tree that is there, and that's also important. And then the owner is preserving this over 100 years old dragon wheel tree in the backyard, which is really important. I took a tour of the house inside and out. What I see the owner doing is opening the inside of the house to bring light, to make it more to the family life. They're starting out. They're building a swimming pool in the back that will really compatible with the whole site. I do not foresee this building being torn down in the next 20 years. And even if it was, I just do not see that any single family design review board, any reviewer will approve something that is so incompatible with the rest of the area, because every rest of the area has very high standard, high pedigree homes over there. This is a Mediterranean style home, and it's a nice home. But to be honest with you, my personal opinion, it doesn't rise to the level of the pedigree of, let's say, the Crocker Row home or the Fielding Institute, or it's beautiful. And I'm not saying it's not, but I just do not see that we can put it on I cannot put it on the potential list with clear conscience. And what I would suggest is to write a letter for the record by this commission to say the site of this property was the site of the White families. And this wall that wraps around and this tree are important part of the site that should be preserved. And should any future owner would want to restore this building back, we would applaud that. If they demo it, they better not demo it without subjecting to these environmental reviews.
Right. Okay.
That's my take on this whole thing.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Murray. Thank you very much for all the time that you spent. I know that went over and above. Commissioner Lavoie, questions or comments? Actually, just questions for now, please.
No questions.
Commissioner Sharp, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Jury, any questions? No. And Commissioner Schallenberger, questions after hearing Commissioner Murray?
Yeah, just one. Accepting the report, in other words, not designating it or not putting it on the potentials list, does not preclude a future historic renovation that could then lead to a designation. Is that correct?
That would be absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Winnick. Questions? Commissioner Riz. Okay. Let's go with comments. We'll start with Commissioner Schallenberger. Any comments on this?
No comments. Commissioner Murray's review and synopsis tells me all I need to know.
Commissioner Winnick?
I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Rios?
Nothing.
Commissioner Lavoie?
Several, please. I'd like to thank the owners for doing the work they're doing on the house. Please, that's not the issue. I don't have an issue with anything that's being proposed. It is only with the report. And I do not ever want to have any of this discussion interpreted as the report is seriously flawed. It is not flawed in any respect. It's just that I disagree with the preparer's evaluation. It is not flawed at all. I highly respect the preparer and her scholarship. What concerns me is I've been on this commission long enough to see the guidelines reinterpreted and reinterpreted and reinterpreted, and I think at this point in history we are a little bit more authentic than they have been since they were initiated, even under Dr. Gebhardt. Under a previous commission, I would have understood that these additions could have been made to a structure of merit and been approved. So it's
the previous editions.
The previous editions that we find so character removing. Okay. So I mean, and so once we remove it off the potential list, someone can come in and without any discretionary review tear the house down.
May I comment on that? Slower.
Yes. Please.
That's not accurate. We now have a demolition review study area, and that would prevent the demolition without looking at it. However, we would ask the question, is this historic? And if we had some precedence, you're correct. You're saying doesn't have historic significance at this point.
So there would be no basis to deny an applicant?
At this point, yes.
At this point.
If you make that conclusion.
If we make that conclusion. See, that's my concern. The other concern is when I read the report, the words all read correct, and then I look at the pictures, and I look at that house, and I can tell you when it was built. There's enough fabric left in this house for me to say I can see where this house came from. I can also tell when all the additions were made. And I'm somewhat of an historian, an armchair historian. So it's sort of like, I mean, and it's only like the bottom threshold of potential list. I'm not saying it's structure of merit. I probably would have a hard time saying it's a structure of merit because of the additions. But taking it off the potential list is a concern to me.
Is it on the potential list? It's not.
No, it's not. But the report states that it doesn't qualify.
Its eligibility to be on the
Yes.
potential list.
Mr. Lavoie, if I can just comment, the purpose of the potential list was to identify resources that you believe are worthy of designation. And so I'm just concerned with the slippery slope that we have that would start catching these potential significant structures that have been altered. The fact is that we have a lot of these structures in the city that have been altered, either through reviews by our boards or without reviews, because we have changed the trigger mechanism. So some of these were reviewed without any discretionary review, and that's why they're incompatible. So we are concerned with going down that path of, we're going to call something potential because we don't want it demolished. If you don't want it demolished, then I would recommend we move for designation, because that's what our ordinance implies, that you don't want a structure demolished because you want to preserve it and you want it to protect it by designating. That's what our city attorney is sort of directed to.
My real issue is I can see enough of the original architecture and some of the changes as being reasonably compatible to the Secretary of the Interior standards. Maybe not as well done as we would do today, but it's a learning curve.
So let me ask you a question.
That's my issue. That is my only issue with the report.
Okay.
Next.
Commissioner Murray.
Yeah, and I think that's where we disagree. That's where Bill Lavoie and disagree, because to me these additions violate the standards. It's very hard for me to justify them that they agree with the standards. Yet at the same time, I feel that there is protection in that if we write a letter to mention the stonework and the tree, this site would always be monitored, because you've got important features of the property that are those could be on a potential list, and therefore you would always have a view of how this is because it's in a corner, which is an important part of that corner. That corner is the setting of that corner is got integrity, even though the house, in my opinion, the house has been damaged.
And there was a previous Victorian house on that.
Yeah, and it's the Victorian house is the site that is associated with the White family. That's why I'm saying that it should be recognized as the site of the White family. And in fact, the surveyor who did this in 1980, Rebecca Connard, I have her form here. She just this is before the porte cochere was added, and she just says site of A.S. White house. There's no big identification with the house, whether the house is historic. And I think it's because of that addition that really took away the intention of this Mediterranean style house. So what I'm saying is we could say that this is important for the site of the Victorian home, the wall around it, the tree. If those are important, then those can be on the potential list. I don't know if this.
Those were not.
But those were not in the report.
Those
so
were not
that's
in the
my
report.
that's my suggestion to the report to include those. And no matter what, if it's a site on the potential list, it will be scrutinized by this commission. If that's the concern, that's a concern. I don't know.
We'll go on to Mr. Sharp. Mr. Sharp, any?
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Oh, Commissioner Winnick.
Thank you. So I have a question. It made Commissioner Schellenberg sort of asked the same question. Is it possible that we could just determine that the project that's before us, I know it's just the structure report that's before us, but the project that it's associated with it, could we just come to determination that a historic structures report's not required for this project, and then not have to vote on the report and just basically green light the project to proceed? This is a question.
No, you can't.
No.
It's 50
No,
years old.
we have to accept the report.
It's
to
a
let that
sequel.
happen.
Yeah, it would be a sequel issue. Sequence.
It's triggered by sequence,
Yeah.
so we have no choice.
Yeah.
Because, okay. Because, okay, I get it. Thank you.
Commissioner Sharp, any
One quick comment. The report ignores the fact that Sam Battistone Sr. and his wife lived here for many years.
Yes.
It was their home. They raised, I believe, their younger children there. Certainly their grandchildren were there. And the porte cochere, as out in front, was done to allow Mr. Battistone to get in and out of his wheelchair, out of the rain, and so forth. And it has minimal contact with the house, just a very small beam running across, and was really meant to be a temporary part of the architecture. And so I'm inclined to think that the house does belong on the potential list. And to say that the additions have caused that not to be, I think probably are wrong. Mr. Battistone was a co-founder of Sambo's restaurant chain, built up over 1,000 stores across the United States. It's a pretty renowned family that did all that and lived there.
Okay. Commissioner Jury, any comments?
Yeah, I think we're actually talking about two different scapes. One is a streetscape, which we all have problems with. Not the porte cochere so much, but that long slant that's attached to the west side of the house. And then the back, which is much more in keeping with what we think of as Mission Revival. And, I think I wouldn't like to be a party to preemptive designation, but I do think that the house should be protected. If there's a way of not accepting the report, if that's staff's position, I think to not accept the report.
No,
to accept the report. Pardon me. To not accept the report and include the site as some sort of protection against the possible demolition down the road. Is that a possibility? What Commissioner Murray was saying?
It certainly is a possibility, and it's sort of a clever way. But is it really the right reason Is it the right way to do it?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Hernandez? I'd like Ms. Hernandez to weigh in.
I think if you don't accept the report, you can move to put the property on the potentials list, and that would give you purview to review the project, and then it would be under the HLC's review rather than going to SFDB. That would be the process, correct?
And I don't know that it's necessarily that the HLC wants the sole purview of it. It's just...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Lavoie.
I'd like to make two motions. The first motion is to accept the report.
Okay. We have a motion by Lavoie, a second by Schallenberger. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, we have Sharp opposed, we have Lavoie opposed, we have Arias opposed, and let me finish, and we have Winnick opposed. Motion fails. Okay. What's your second motion, Mr. Lavoie? Huh?
You said two.
I said Sharp.
Sharp, Lavoie, Arias, and Winnick were opposed.
Correct.
And you only mentioned two that were for the motion. And there's how many of you? 2, 4, 6, 8 of you.
I wasn't for the motion, but I was going to ask to add something.
Well, wait for the second motion.
Yeah, I'll wait for the second.
Well, no, that motion didn't fail. It's a tie.
I didn't vote.
So it did not pass.
Did not pass.
Okay.
It didn't fail. It didn't pass.
Okay, I'll start with
Does that make sense?
the second motion I was going to make.
Failed.
Okay. Commissioner Lavoie.
To request of staff to proceed with investigation of nomination of the site walls and elements as identified by Ms. Murray as being on the potential list.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Do you have a second?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Drury. Lavoie and Drury. All in favor? Aye.
And I.
Let me just finish.
Aye.
Let me finish, please. Opposed?
Aye.
One opposition. Schallenberger. Abstain?
I'm going to change to abstain.
Okay.
You have to state on that.
Ms. Murray.
I just want to see if we can add a direction for the record to put in the file.
Okay.
That should this building come forward for any demolition, that demolition shouldn't request to not demo this house, but to restore it or have its history. The other thing I was going to add also is the Battiston,
era.
for the preparer of the report to add.
Is that okay with the maker of the motion?
Sure.
Okay.
So
Which motion? The first motion or the second one?
Second motion.
could we have a motion read?
No, I'd like the second motion just clean. Just recommending that the site walls.
Do you accept the report?
No.
Not
No, that was the first motion that failed. The second motion was only that staff begin the process to add the site walls and landscape elements as identified by Ms. Murray as being on the potential list.
And that motion
Okay,
passed.
so then
And that
de
motion
facto,
passed.
that makes the report acceptable.
No.
No. Okay.
No, nothing about the report in the
Okay.
second motion.
And I would request, Mr. Chair, I would request that Mrs. Murray, I had to think about it, make a second motion regarding her statement that she, about being in the file.
Well, here's what I would be my. Could I do another motion? Or?
Yeah.
You can make as many motions as you
My
want.
motion-
There's the second motion. One failed, now I have another motion.
And unfortunately, I called the question.
But my question is this. Mr. Lavoie said at the end of his statement, as being on the contentious list, but it's not.
No.
you saying
To
historical?
begin the process, to put it on the potential list.
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, so since we're not accepting the report, do you want to add the house to the potentials list?
I don't think that's what Commissioner Lavoie's
No. Okay.
direction was.
No,
No.
but,
Okay.
but that is our next step. Right?
No, not necessarily.
No,
I mean,
what
What you asked for was putting the walls on the potential list. That's
Yes.
the way I understood it.
Yes.
Yes, but what Mr. Lavoie is alluding to is that once it gets on the potential list, property alterations on the property would come to the commission for review. So you would have that ability to make sure
It's a
that
mechanism.
there's a mechanism
yeah.
to review. But the building would not be added on as a potential list property, just the walls as you're indicating.
But how do we get the applicant out of this limbo with?
Well, no, what we'll do is we'll schedule in 2 weeks that it be placed on the potential list, have them waive the 60-day waiting period, and review the project at the same time, right? If you put it on the potential list for those walls, you take action on the project.
And if we do that with a report that says we shouldn't,
No, what the report has indicated is that the project is not a historic resource, and by you not going affirmative, we would at this point not treat it like a historic resource, and you would just approve the project as not being inconsistent with damaging the historic elements on the property.
It's not damaging.
That's what you're finding. When you approve the project, you're going to say it doesn't affect the historic elements on the
But
property.
that's in the future.
Well, it'll be in 2 weeks if the applicant wants to move forward.
And therefore, it does not require a redrafting or a new report.
No, you can request the report repair enhance the report to identify which elements you think are historic.
No,
That's up to
she
the.
does quite well.
No, but on the other hand, could we just work with the report that's there, even though it's not accepted? Like, can we still do the rest of our findings and just leave the report status the way
No,
it is?
we are not going to deal with the structure as a historic resource.
Right.
You'll just come in and you'll determine that it's compatible with that architecture and indicate that it does not damage what you believe to be historic on the property.
Which is the wall. I want
Which is the
everybody to
wall.
understand that. So when the project comes to us in the future, if it's doesn't touch the wall, then basically it's fine. If it's
Or
compatible with the architecture, it has nothing to do with yes.
It has-
Or the trees.
Let me finish. It has nothing to do with the architecture of the house.
But it has to do with the with the
Well, excuse me, the
landscaping.
integrity of the
Streetscape and neighborhood.
Landscaping, the trees.
There's still design review guidelines.
I know. Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Rios?
Well, I would again ask Mr. Murray, is there anything that you want to make another motion about? Because you did indicate...
Well, no, I just wanted to say that Mr. Sharp talked about Battiston, and Battiston family lived there for 44 years. Now, that association, I associate them more with their Sambo's restaurant on Cabri Boulevard, but that's something that the historian didn't really go into. So I was just suggesting that.
Well, I think the historian was picking a period of significance.
Exactly.
And that period of significance happens to be in the 20s, 30s,
exactly.
and 40s.
And that's why I didn't mention Battiston as being associated with this house. To me, it's associated with a white family. From 1904 to 1929 is really the site.
Okay.
And anyway.
Mr. Lamone, I have a question, Mr. Chair, procedurally.
Mr. Lavoie.
If at present, the house is not on the potential list.
That's correct.
It's only over 50 years old. And that triggered the historic report, right? Mm-hmm.
No, what triggered was that there was a discretionary review required because of the zoning modification, and therefore it triggered CEQA. And we need to ask the question, is it a resource? So if it were for the zoning modification, this project may not have required any type of review.
I understand. So if it wasn't us, it would have been the Single Family Design Review Board?
That's correct.
Okay, so Ms. Feliciano, are you clear on the motion? Okay.
Can you read it to us, please?
So what do we do? I mean, how do we help this applicant get over us?
Okay,
and
well,
on with their. I mean, they're doing a pergola.
They're doing a great job.
In 2 weeks, we will place this item on to be included on the potential list for the following reasons: specific elements that you believe are historic, whether it's the site walls, the trees. That will be the reason why it was placed on the potential list. That will grant you purview over this property. However, when you review the property, you may not raise the issue of whether it's historic on the building. You're just going to look at it from a compatibility neighborhood preservation ordinance and find that it's compatible and move it on. In the future, if there's a proposal for demolition, as I understand it, you want it noted that you may have objections to a complete demolition, and we'll have that on record.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have one last procedural question.
Yes.
Because I think it might help the applicant. So there's a structures report that's in limbo.
That's what I'm worried about.
Okay, well, maybe we're on the same page. So the question I have there is, what avenue should be taken on that? Are we at a point now where the structures report could go back to the preparer of the report to have the history, the parts that we've just noted about the streetscape and the wall, that those could perhaps be included in the report, and the report could come back to us for approval, and maybe at that time it could be approved?
That would be up to the maker of the motion.
Well, no, that's not up to the maker of the motion.
That's a motion.
That's a brand new motion.
It would be more up to, no, we don't have to make a motion. It would be more up to whether or not the preparer of the report agrees with that. Yes, it would be a suggestion.
What she was unwilling to do was change her opinion on the impact.
Correct.
On the conclusion. But I don't think to speak for Alex, to identify the walls, the landscape elements.
Yes.
These are new elements that weren't in a report.
They were not in the report.
And request of her that she find some significance in them.
Not request of her, but suggest to her.
Suggest to her. And that the inclusion of some language about the Battistone family being in the house.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's not part of the motion.
Okay, this is
It's additional direction.
A new
after.
motion.
Oh.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
A new motion to request of the preparer of the report in 2 weeks, or as fast as she can, to include a description of the sandstone walls at the street and significant historic landscape materials as being, suggesting to her that she consider their historical importance, and to include in the report a brief discussion of the habitation of the Battistone family in the report, and all other elements of the report remaining the same.
Okay, so
second
are
that.
we giving, okay.
That's a motion?
Yeah, that was a motion, you're right, okay. So we have a motion made by Lavoie, a second by Drury, under discussion. Can we make two motions on an item?
One fails, Ken.
Well, the second one didn't fail, though.
But it wasn't about the report.
I think you're talking about the report now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but what
Okay,
was it about then?
I withdraw the first motion.
No,
you
can't. The first motion
Well,
failed. The second motion passed.
Yeah, but it's not. But it wasn't about the report.
Then we can't. Then we can't make that motion because
No,
if
I
it wasn't
disagree
about the
with you.
report, the report is what's agendized.
You can make that motion. I disagree with you.
Okay.
And-
Then I'd like to reconsider the second
God.
motion that I
Okay.
made, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Point of order.
Yes, go ahead.
I move
Commissioner
that
Lavoie.
we reconsider the second motion.
I'll
Do
second
we have a
that.
second? Okay. We have a second by Arias.
We need to vote on it, Mr. Chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Go ahead, Commissioner Lavoie.
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Okay.
As previously
Okay,
stated.
everybody remain quiet. Let Mr.
May
Lavoie
I
speak.
make a...
No, as
No.
previously stated. Do you want me to repeat it?
You want to append to it? You want to add to
Mr.
it?
Chair, isn't it, and Commissioners, aren't we just then, for this motion that is on the table right now, combining the attempted
More or less.
last
Third motion.
with motion
second.
number 2?
Correct.
Yes.
We will do that.
Okay, so he does not need to restate.
Correct.
Okay.
Call for the question.
All right. You seriously want me to call for the question? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. End of discussion. Move on to the next item.
Would someone please explain what we just did?
Fine, motion 2 and 3.
Yeah, with due respect to the next applicant, I think the commission needs a break. I know the chair does.
Did they, I don't think there was a second.
Another one like you.
And all commissioners at the table, please. Commissioner Drury, at the table, please. Commissioner Sharp, at the table, please. Okay, the next item is item number 3. It's a miscellaneous action item. It's for 1318 Morrison Avenue. It's a request by staff to add the building at 1318 Morrison Avenue to the City of Santa Barbara Potential Historic Resources List. Ms. Hernandez, please.
Yes, this property was identified in the Lower Riviera survey as having historic significance as a contributing structure to the potential Bungalow Haven Historic District. Because it is already deemed historically significant through the survey, I worked with the applicant to perhaps not have a historic structures report since we already know the significance. And I worked with them on following the design guidelines of the Lower Riviera Special Design District, which it is part of, and that should have been mentioned on the agenda. I wanted to make that clear, as well as following the Secretary of Interior standards. Because this is a contributing structure, a potential contributing structure to a potential historic district, these smaller structures are significant as a whole, and we want to make the process for the homeowners as simple as possible. So I tried to point them to these design guidelines in this direction of stepping back the addition and keeping it off the front facade, and so that it would not have an impact to the streetscape, and the original features of the front elevation would remain. So I did find, after working with them, that this design before you does meet the Secretary of Interior standards, and the concept of the addition is compatible with the site and the neighborhood, and it does not pose an adverse impact to the streetscape. So that is why I did not request a structures report at this time. I also, that is just how it ended up to you, and I wanted just you to let that know now that now it's here for design review and your input on that portion. That is not in lieu of design review. That is just helping them move along the process because they've already been surveyed.
Anything else?
That's it. Do you need a copy of the survey report?
Yes, please. Okay. Do you have anything to say about the miscellaneous action item, placing this on the potential historic resource list as the applicant? No? Okay. Then we'll move to public comment. I have a letter acknowledging written receipt from Ms. Paula Westbury in opposition. Next person is Sherry Ray, and the next is, after that is Calum Deforest. Ms. Ray. Ms. Gans, could you set up your microphone for her,
Chair.
please?
Mr. Chair, was the letter from Paula Westbury in opposition to putting it on the potentials list?
It's in yes.
Just in opposition.
It's yes, but it's in opposition. Ms. Westbury opposes.
And this is not for the design at this time.
That's correct. Ms. Ray,
Thank
you have the
very-
microphone.
Thank you for letting me be here. I sent a letter to all of you. I hope you had a chance to read it, and I won't go over that again. I just want to add a few little comments. I am concerned about the noticing that had nothing whatsoever about the property being located in the Lower Riviera Design District. I think that was what spurred my concern, that it wasn't in there, and so that's when I started getting involved in this one. Thanks to Mr. Deforest, it caught my attention because I'm like, well, where are they reviewing it? So I think that's important to remember that we're all very busy and we need to know this sort of thing. I can't afford to ignore this kind of thing because we've had painful experience in the neighborhood when it wasn't properly reviewed and we did not receive proper noticing. I just want to also say that this is about policy. It's not personal. These are very nice people, and I want them to be able to have what they want. However, there is precedent in the neighborhood for denying second-story
Remember,
additions.
this is about putting it on the potential list.
Oh, well, okay. Well, if you want me to talk in the number...
Okay, you had put down item 3 and 4.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
You would rather I come back?
Well, if you don't want to make a public comment on the potential, putting it on the potential list, then come back for.
I'll come back.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to cross you off for item 3 then.
Okay.
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 Then
Thank you.
we have Mr. Deforest. Thank you, Mr. Ray. We have Mr. Deforest.
I want to reiterate Ms. Ray's comment about the omission. Oh, I want to reiterate Ms. Ray's comment about this. There was no indication in the agenda that this property was within the Lower Riviera Design District, and that was very important, because it got me rather upset.
On behalf of staff, I apologize. Continue.
Fine, thank you. So, hope they'll be careful of this kind of thing in the future. I'm sure they will. So that mainly is, thank you. That's what I wanted to point out.
Thank you, Mr. Deforest. I will close public comment and move to the commission for questions. Commissioner Drury, any questions?
I do not.
Sharp, any questions? No questions. Commissioner Murray, any questions? Commissioner Lavoie, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Arias, Commissioner Winnick, any questions regarding potential? Any questions, Commissioner Schallenberger? Comments, anyone? Anyone at all?
I'd like to thank them.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Lavoie?
I'll make a motion to confirm the nomination.
Second.
We have a motion by Lavoie, second by Arias. Under discussion, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item number 4, 1318 Morrison Avenue. This is comments only. The project requires environmental assessment, compatibility criteria analysis, and staff hearing officer review. Staff, do you have anything to comment on?
No, I do have a copy of the Lower Riviera Design Guidelines
We all
that I
received
sent
that?
you.
We all
So if
received
anybody
that?
needs
Okay.
them, they're here.
You all have the floor. Please introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation.
I'm Brian Pollard, architect.
Talk into the microphone and make sure it's on. The green light will turn it on. Now it's bright green.
Press that. Yeah,
There you go.
Okay. Brian Pollard, architect.
Thank you.
I'll let the owners introduce themselves.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Hope Firestone. This is my husband, Chris Hill.
Welcome.
And thank you. We bought our beautiful home 14 years ago, and we've raised our family here. We have 2 children who went through Santa Barbara High, have wonderful friends and memories, and we plan to stay for quite a while. So we love this home, we love our street. By virtue of the fact that it's a dead end, makes us all very close neighbors. We take care of each other's pets, we babysit each other's children, we look after each other. We have block parties for Halloween and 4th of July, and it's a very close-knit street. It's very special to us, and so that's part of why we want to stay, adding a little bit to it, and we love it.
Okay.
So we hope you'll consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you describe to us what you're proposing to do?
I've got photographs of the neighborhood, if I can roll these out. Hopefully this will help with orienting you to Morrison Street. This little map here is an indication of the orientation of each photo. Morrison is this small cul-de-sac street. This first photo is right next to the market here on Olive and Victoria. The second one shows a couple of 2-story additions over here on probably 31 and 30.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second.
Sure.
Staff, do you have the pointer? Continue.
What happened to our... So, just a question. So the street immediately east is Salsapuedes?
Up here.
Yeah.
Right.
Salsapuedes and Olive is halfway in between.
Yes.
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 Okay, continue, please. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Racking my brain.
And so number 3 is a view from looking up Morrison from Victoria to the dead end. 4 is just a little closer as I'm walking, as you can see right here. Number 4 down, and then let's see. 5 is looking. I'm sorry. This is this area right here. Yeah, exactly. That's the project site. And so this is the neighboring building, number 5, that is to the right of that as you face the project site. And then this is the project site here, the bungalow here with the scalloped picket fence. This is another photo next to it showing the house next adjacent to it with a second-story addition. This is across the street, basically from the project site. These 2 homes here at the end. This is at the end, and this is number 24. And then this one here is looking back down the street, Morrison. And then this shows the second-story addition, number 20.
Okay.
And there's number 22 is a second-story addition. So this is...
Okay. Thank you.
These are just showing you real quickly just around the neighborhood, basically some second-story additions. This being the Mediterranean and Laguna project.
If you just mention the street, that would be great.
Okay.
And then we'll...
These, I think you can just kind of notice that there are. This is actually Victoria, just right across from Morrison. There's a couple of buildings here that are 2-story, and then
13 is Victoria.
This is 13. This is, I believe,
right there.
Right with there's a barn in the back, a 2-story barn, and I believe that is this lady's home here. This is another 2-story house. So showing just around the neighborhood, you can see within this 2-block area, there's some 2-story additions. Okay. So I just wanted to present.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
have a perspective. It might be that there's a couple of those that you can. So, the existing bungalow, turn of the century, is 1,030 square feet, 3-bedroom, 1-bath residence with an existing detached 395 square foot garage/shop.
Wait just a minute. How many kids did you raise with one bathroom?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Saint.
I'm sorry, but it's just have to go there.
Yeah, well, that was my first question too. It was.
Okay.
It's pretty
made it
remarkable.
You did.
We're proposing a 305 square foot second-story addition, the rear of the main house, with a 31 square foot addition to the first floor with a fireplace. Which is this here. The proposal will make this total square footage 1,366 square feet. It'll become a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with the existing 395 square foot garage shop structure will remain. And the FAR is 100%. 100% FAR is 2,325 square feet. And we're proposing a 1,761 square foot FAR, which is 76%. That includes all structures. We are requesting a modification of window changes on the northwest side of the existing house because of the existing house is approximately 1 foot into the northwest property line. So this is this. Use your pointer, please. Okay, this is the elevation that we're requesting the modification portion of this project. We're rearranging these windows, basically not adding any more glazing to that elevation. We're just removing and replacing so that it makes more sense with the new plan. So that has to do with the modification. And we contacted the Lower Riviera District chairperson, which was Leslie Cypress, letting her know way before this, just to say that we're starting on the design of this addition to this property, and we wanted to make sure that if we could get anything in front of them. And she said if you go meet with Steve Doty, who is a co-author of this, the Lower Riviera Guidelines, if you meet with him, then she would be okay with it. Or basically that's what she directed us to do. So I met with Steve Doty, went over the drawings with him, and basically he was comfortable with the design. He did mention that he felt like if you could lower the plate heights from 8 feet, which I originally proposed on the second story, to 7'6", that was a suggestion and a comment from him. So I made that change to the plans, and basically that's it. I think that's just really open for any kind of questions. Would you walk us through the
elevations real quick?
Sure. This might, just to give you context to the second story, this is the master bedroom, basically a suite. It's a 14 by 14 size bedroom, or 13 and a half by 14. Small bath, and then the stairs, and then this closet that's at a 5-foot plate here. So, we're tucking this at a 5 and letting that, so it's not full height at this point. It is along this line here. So the gable runs up, straight up here, and this is an 8-foot or 7'6" plate.
And that is the asymmetrical gable you're talking about here?
Yes. This would be where the closet is. And then basically...
I'm sorry, let me just go. Okay, so there's that 4-foot section break there.
Right. Right, this section here.
3 or 4 foot.
And so this is showing the existing front, and then this is where that addition, that 35 square foot addition with the fireplace is being proposed. And one of the big things, just if you don't mind, I wanted to show you on the floor plan that the width of this opening here, of this room as it exists, is 11.5 feet from inside to inside. So this was really going to open that up so that they could really get kind of an arrangement to enjoy a fireplace and enjoy this living space a lot better. So that was the intent of moving a little bit outside this, and actually feeling like it created kind of a nice balance to just that simple gable that ran back there. But so that is this area right here, and as you can see, this is the second story addition, and the existing garage structure that is in the back of the property.
Okay. That concludes your presentation?
Yes, it does.
Okay, then I'll open public comment. I'm acknowledging a written letter from Ms. Paula Westbury in opposition. Also, we had several letters. One from Blake and Gina Andrews in support of the project. One from Nancy Hirsch in support of the project. One from Randy Wright in support of the project. And then Sherry Ray is here, so I won't mention hers. And then we have Rick and Wendy Molkbachler in support. Karen Boyer, she is concerned about the impact to the view from her house from the street that the second story addition would create. And then live people, we have Sherry Ray, Ms. Ray, followed by Calum Deforest. Hi.
Yes, I was saying before that this is a policy issue, not a personal issue, and I want to mention that most of those examples, in fact, I don't know if I can say all, but part of the reason for this special design district and the establishment of Bungalow Haven was in reaction to all of those second-story additions that was changing changing the character of the neighborhood. And I'm certainly not here to second-guess Mr. Doty because he's a fine architect.
Excuse me, Ms. Ray.
Yes.
Mr. Cotto, if you're looking for something, would you mind doing it away from the microphone so that we can hear? Thank you. Continue, Ms. Ray.
I'm just concerned particularly because of the number of modifications that are happening throughout the neighborhood. That's what the design district is meant to prevent, is to keep that intact character. And when I read the report, I saw twice the word modest was used. Modest bungalow and modest neighborhood. And one of the character-defining parts of being a modest bungalow is a single-story structure. And that's where it gets of concern. And I did want to point out also that I know specifically of 2 cases where a second story did not happen when the homeowner requested it. No. One of them is Larry Gamble on Sola Street, and he requested a second story directly across the street from Steve Doty's house, and he was not allowed to do that. And he found a way to make it work. And then I did mention in my letter the project at Mitchell Terena and Olive, where the city wanted to put a second story, and the homeowner said no. And they worked out a deal, and now it's a single-story addition. So I'm just concerned. And I wanted to use this example that my father always used when I was growing up. Whenever we were making decisions, he would talk about, you've got a salami. And if you cut little pieces of the salami, pretty soon, you don't have any salami left. And I'm worried about that with my neighborhood. It's a largely intact neighborhood that's up for historic designation. And pretty soon, we're not going to have anything historic left. So I'm just concerned about that.
Just one question for you. Was your father Italian? Salami?
You think? Yeah, thank you.
All right, Mr. DeForest.
Yeah. My question is, would this second-story addition or any second-story addition impact the designation of the Lower Riviera Special Design District as a historic district? If we take all the historic elements, it will, by additions, as Ms. Ray says, will no longer have anything historic. Is there any way the addition could be designed as to be one story, so the second story impact would be less, and we could keep the cottage bungalow character could be kept for the district? Thank you.
Mr. Hernandez, could you respond to the first part of his questions?
Second-story additions that are pushed towards the rear do meet the Secretary of Interior standards as maintaining the character-defining features of the front elevation. Because it's set back, you still have the original front story on the front and the original character-defining features. So it would still qualify as a contributing structure.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I'll bring it to the Commission for questions. Commissioner Schallenberger, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Whitnick?
No questions.
Commissioner Arias?
None.
Commissioner Lavoie?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have a question. The reference south elevation of the master bedroom addition, is that at the second floor setback? Is that why it's only a 1 foot overhang?
What sheet are you on?
Well, sheet
A3.
No, I'm actually on about 4.
Four?
Yeah, I'm looking at 3, but I'm talking about 4. Yeah, well, that's the master bedroom, so I guess it's the next sheet.
A5.
Yes. The south wall of the master bedroom, is that set by the second story setback?
That's a drafting error. As far as this overhang should be.
No, the wall itself, not the roof overhang, the wall.
Oh, right. That was just to give that face some relief.
Could it be more?
It could be.
Could it move more in that direction?
It could move in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
But you have your driveway below it.
Yeah, it's fine.
But it's still.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Arias?
My question rests with the location of
A3?
the chimney.
Hold on, let me get to A3. A3?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Is it far enough away that the smoke from the chimney is not going to affect the second story?
It does meet the code requirements as far as distance from the structure and height. So,
yeah, I know it meets the code, but I also know that
sometimes it.
yeah, because I got it next door to me, and that I get it in from the house next door to me, even though they meet the code. And I'm just wondering if you had thought very carefully about the interaction between the chimney and any new windows and things.
The idea was that we were not going to go with, potentially a wood-burning stove, but to go with the log kits that offer it.
Yeah, but this house is going to be for a long time, so you have to assume what you do, the next owner may not do. So you have to look at the long-term thing. And my concern is that you consider the ventilation problem, potential ventilation, even though it is within the code.
Sure. Commissioner Murray, any questions?
No, I don't.
Commissioner Sharp? No. Commissioner Drury?
Yes, could you tell me how far the addition in the rear extends from the existing wall on the, what would it be?
Are you talking from
south side? I'm usually page A3.
Here to here?
Yes, that extension into the driveway space. How much?
So what is that dimension from there to there?
6 feet.
That's about, I'd say probably
8 feet?
8 feet, and that's existing. That's an existing footprint that is there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? How about comments? Commissioner Schellenberger, are you there?
Mr. Chair?
Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I, just before you get to comments,
Mr. Cotto.
if you would allow me to clarify the nature of the modification that's being
Please do.
requested? So the building is non-conforming as to the interior setback of the whatever
side.
the left-hand side is, right? And the only modification that is being requested is they're moving some windows around, and the moving of the windows requires the modification. You could make them smaller in the same location. You can have them the same. You can remove them, but if you move them at all, even if you're making them smaller and moving them, that needs a
Triggers the
modification. So it's pretty minor in our standpoint, and we support the mods.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful for you to do that. I appreciate that. Commissioner Schellenberger, any comments?
Just a couple. So generally speaking, the size, bulk, and scale seems appropriate. 17 feet is not such a tall building to me, but I'd like to see just in the next, as we go forward, some building sections. I think that's going to really help me understand how this thing relates to the existing structure a little better than even the elevations. The elevations do a good job, but they're a little plainer, so it's kind of hard to see relief and beyond. Maybe just a graphics issue, but it doesn't. It sort of reads. I'm not seeing any depth. So that
Talking specifically about the southeast elevation on 8.6.
Yeah. You can even take
Southwest
elevation.
Yeah.
That big mass is way beyond, but in this 2D drawing, oftentimes you'll see that as grayed out beyond or something, and it sort of helps give some depth to the drawing. And then on the, can you have this back, please? On this southeast elevation, I just had an architectural question or comment here. These eaves of the roof look a little disproportionate to the width of the mass there, and I know that you're carrying the eaves. You're carrying that same eave depth from the existing structure up to the addition structure, and I understand why that is, but that looks a little disproportionate and awkward to me. But again, there may be just a graphics question here. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the...
No, actually, you're looking at a different elevation.
A6, southeast elevation.
Talking about here.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And staying on that elevation, so I understand that you've tried to accommodate some plate heights here, but it looks like that's creating its own conflict where the window head is obscured by the eave overhang here. If you look to the existing structure below, you can see the rafters are up above the window trim, and there's the way the building reads is different in that with this different plate heights. So I understand the attempt to accommodate, but that's creating an architectural issue from my perspective. Okay, I think I've covered all my points. Thanks.
Okay, just a minute. Commissioner Winnick?
Yeah, again, I'll just maybe carry the theme of size, the bulk or scale or whatever. And so overall, I see it being compatible with the one caveat. And I was trying to figure out a solution just because I see a plan implication. It's hard. But the extension of that gable over the closet, which is showing up on the southwest elevation, that makes the addition in some ways almost feel, because the front elevation of the house itself, that front facade, because of its breakup in articulation, in many ways it feels smaller to me and more broken up than the addition at the back, because it extends almost the entire width of the house with that closet addition also. So I guess I'm trying to reconcile the feeling of the width of the addition. It seems like the overall addition width feels a little out of scale with the house below. I guess would be maybe the best way for me to summarize that. Because it seems like it's just reaching so far. So anyway, that's...
Well, can I supplement one thing? I wanted to say that I think given I think I understand what you're proposing here, and I think your rendering shows me much better than the elevations do, and I get a much better feel for and can support size, bulk, and scale and massing from that rendering. I think the elevations are actually sort of throwing the eye off a little bit, but if I look at that, I'm very comfortable with the massing.
Commissioner Rios?
I would like, when you come back, I would like to know some idea of the adjacent properties, photographs of what these adjacent properties are going to look at and look into from this site. And I also agree with you that I think that it looks stuck on and it just doesn't quite fit. And I'd also like to know if you've actually done any consideration of making it a one-level building, if it is possible to do that. I'm not sure it is, but I would like to know if you have investigated that possibility, because I can understand the desire to keep the integrity of the neighborhood, a one-story bungalow-type neighborhood.
If you could provide her with a quick answer.
We spent several weeks on a single-story proposals, many of them to work with the open yard and all that. So we tried to attach the garage to the back and use some of that. And
short answer is yes.
Yes, we attempted to
continue.
Accomplish.
I think what I would like to have seen is some of their efforts and drawings. Yeah. So that we could, because there's some very good architects on board. Your turn.
Commissioner Lavoie.
You're blushing again.
You never show them too many options. You show them your best one. I agree with the comment that it's an awkward addition, and I don't have a problem with the size of it. But it looks like an addition. It lacks the simplicity of the craftsman style. And it's a very simple style when you really boil it down. And it has everything to do with the simplicity of the roof form. So to make it more simple and more craftsman, keep the sheet A.6, please. Why don't we wireless?
That would be nice.
It's not true wireless.
If you kept that line across the building,
is that the belly band?
The base of the building, read straight across, and however that transition happens on the existing building, and usually it's a flared out shingle. Keep that line all the way around. And the reason why I asked about the south wall of the master bedroom, they wouldn't have just done a foot cantilever. If they're going to go for it, they would have gone for it. And bracketed it up to look like it's really held up. So your brackets belong there and not maybe there. The other thing I'd suggest, this roof is in the wrong direction. It needs to go this way.
Yeah, he's right.
And it will bring this whole line down and bring the whole roof down. And looks like it belongs on this elevation and on that elevation, and be, I think, more attractive from the street and more like they would have done in the craftsman movement. Again, it's sort of like a style appropriate. And you know, the place to put a bracket is where you need one. Underneath balconies and things like that, you know, and simplify it as much as possible. If you don't need these little beams holding it up, don't use them. It's a very spare style, you know. It appears cluttered to the modern eye. keep it simple. But definitely reorient the gable, and I think it will solve some problems. Even if it runs straight across at full height, it will have less of an impact on the front elevation.
Does that affect the solar?
I can only
No.
Excuse me. I guess the
Thank you.
solar
Be
is-
quiet, please.
I agree.
Commissioner Murray.
Yeah, I echo those comments because right now this is you want it to be horizontal, with a horizontal feeling. I was a member of the commission who looked at the one of the iterations of the project where you wanted the one story and to the side, and it was not appropriate either. But what Commissioner Lavoie is really saying is you need to make this house where the addition looks as if it was there before, and that horizontal roof is the most important in that it speaks to the front. The other thing was I was very worried about the comment of the woman from across the street. You don't want to take her view away. And so as you do that, you've got to go to her side of the street and look and see the where the eye meets that, and work with that because it can be done. And like I think what he suggested, that's exactly what I had. I said this is too high. My first initial gut feeling when I saw this is this is too high. It makes the plate height too high, and it's not horizontal. It looks like an addition. You don't want it to be that. So I think those suggestions are really good. But do look at it from the point of view of the woman across the street, and that their view is not going to be absorbed. When they look over, their eyes are going to focus on the front of the house. All the elements there.
Commissioner Sharp, comments?
Thank you.
Additional comments?
I am not convinced that a second story works in this neighborhood. I'm very concerned that the precedent-settingness of this. I'm not convinced that the majority of my colleagues here agree with that. Bill's comment regarding reversing the roof gable will cut 2 or 3, 4 feet maybe if done properly down from the total height of the roof. And I think going across the street to take a photograph and show how that would be if you had a second story there is very important. My notes as we were going along was that it looks like an addition, not integrated, top heavy, out of scale, and I'm hearing that from others here at the same time. That's all.
Commissioner Drury?
I agree with the previous comments. I have nothing further to add.
Okay. Then I will summarize the comments and look for a motion. Add depth to the two-dimensional drawings, or show sections, or show both. Study the depth of the eave on the second story at the southwest elevation. Study relationship of rafter tails on addition as they relate to the first story top of windows. The width of the addition as presented seems to span the whole width of the property, or close to the whole width of the property. Provide more photographs of adjacent properties. The addition is awkward, top-heavy, and out of scale. The addition lacks simplicity of craftsman's style. Study keeping the foundation line at the same datum around the base of the building. Change the orientation of the roof plane on the second floor. Explore more cantilever at south wall of addition. Perhaps introduce brackets. portray a horizontal massing feel from the front. And lastly, work with neighbor across the street to minimize view impact. Somebody want to make a motion? Oh, you're right, sorry.
I would appreciate a comment about the chimney was put in there.
Okay.
The smoke,
Let's see, study the relationship of the chimney to second-story windows.
And ventilation.
With respect to ventilation.
And probably, Mr. Chair, a comment to the staff hearing officer in support of the requested modification of relocating the windows on the north wall.
Okay, so you're saying that the modification is aesthetically appropriate? The proposed modification does not pose, the proposed modification poses does not pose consistency issues with the following design guidelines or required findings. Would you state those required findings and design guidelines, please?
Yes.
It's stated by the
Mr. Chair?
As stated.
Well, we need to know a why.
Okay. You know what? Since there are, it's quite a significant list of comments that the architect will need to return with revised plans. I don't think you can make the compatibility criteria analysis at this point. Do you agree with that?
Well, no, I wasn't trying to make the compatibility.
It sounded like
I was trying to give credence to the modification.
That's entirely appropriate. So I'm going to make sure, I believe Ms. Feliciano will be able to get everything you said and include that in your summary.
We can't say that we support the modification.
Nope, you're not supposed to.
And so what I'm saying is that the modification is aesthetically appropriate. The proposed modification does not pose consistency issues with the following design guidelines or required findings.
Perfect. That will make it into the summary.
Fine.
Thank you.
Then do I have a motion for continuance? Somebody?
For an indefinite continuance?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Arias.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, Mr. Fowler, is it indefinite, or would you like to come back in 2 weeks, or do you think you need a little more time?
I think we're going to need a little more time.
So indefinite.
Would be indefinite. Thank
We had a motion by Lavoy, a second by Arias.
Just a discussion item first?
Yes, under discussion.
Right, we're still in discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question to staff, which I should have asked before. Because this project's going for a modification, because I've heard, it came up several times about, well, what about a one-story addition? And the one-story addition was studied with the notion that there had to be a open space requirement met. If this were to go for a modification, could that be studied also for modification to make the open yard open area smaller? And does that ever get accepted by a hearing officer?
Generally, no. The modification is minor in such that it's just moving the windows, rearranging the windows.
I understand that, but they're still going through that process.
Right, but if you kick it up with another modification, that's very rarely wavered or waived.
That's what I'm asking. Is that almost never supported?
Open yard setbacks hardly, or open yard requirements hardly ever waived.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Winnick, I can't really speak with knowledge on that, but I do know that lessening the open yard area is not a good thing, and especially in this neighborhood with the houses so close. Mr. Power, how large is this parcel? Do you know?
4,500.
4,500 square foot parcel. That would be a really tough thing to add an addition on the ground floor.
I mean, the applicant could pursue that if they wanted to.
I mean, the reason why I'm asking that is there's the balance between keeping historic character of the neighborhood and keeping the amount of open area. So anyway, it was one of those trade-offs. Thank you.
We're planting that seed. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Thank you.
You understand the motion and the comments? Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
I
Commissioner.
will be leaving this meeting at 10 minutes after 4
Good for you.
because of an obligation to go up there with the ethics thing.
All right, well, I am doing the best I can here. Next item on the agenda, I am stepping down for, and Mr. Sharp, would you please take over? It's item number 5, 902 Chapala. I'm going to run out for that.
please. I love this logo.
I think 902 Chapala's been, didn't you announce it was postponed?
You said there was a continuance.
The last item.
So let's go with,
Yeah, we almost caught up.
34 East Mission.
We're 40 minutes late.
Still coming back for this then?
that's what I'm asking.
No, he's not after a cigarette.
I don't think Phil has to step down from this item, so I'm going to go.
Would you please?
At least we'll get started.
Would you all state your names for the record?
Yes, Robert Taylor. I'm the general contractor.
Hi. Jarrett Gorin, the land use consultant.
Jose Luis Esparza, architect.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were here 2 weeks ago with proposed new 3-car garage with an office on the second floor and accessory space. And the comments that we received, in a word, was to simplify the form of the building. And Jose, do you have that smaller version of the old one, just for side-by-side comparison?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea.
Good idea.
A little bit marked at the.
It's okay. Item 1, the project meets the compatibility criteria analysis, but the building needs to be simplified and be subservient to the main house. Yes. Number 2, the design is overly complex. Complex and simplify the gable and hip mix as well as the roof form and details. 3, the project should reflect a design that is appropriate to an accessory building of the period. And that's it.
Okay, so just to refresh, here was the previous one. We had one of the garage bays set back. That was forcing a roof break, which you can see here. We had a lot of hips and gables. We had, the term was, somebody said wedding caking, with the second story being pulled in and everything. So we were asked to simplify it, make it look more of a utilitarian structure. And so that's what we've attempted to do. Why don't we start with just the floor plan of it? So this is sheet 7. So we basically made it into a straight rectangle with the exception of this little bump out. We put all of the garage doors in the same plane. We set back the second story to a separate plane, but all the other walls line up. And we just now have a single hip roof at the top, and we have a small gable or shed where the second story steps back. We have this single gable, and the main house on the property has a combination of hips and gables. We'd like to incorporate the combination, but this is much more simple than how we were doing it before, with just 2 roof forms and really just one main roof form of the single hip. And then this is the one portion of it that deviates from straight rectangles, and we like how that just balances out this elevation here. We had the option of an open deck underneath this, and we prefer how this looks. And then just the same, the 3 simple windows, 3 simple doors in a plane, stacked windows, the same shingles as the original house. So that's our attempts to address those comments from.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Mr. Drury?
I do not.
Ms. Murray? Mr. Lavoy?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else have a question? All right. Trying to hurry this along here.
I do have one question. So
Ms.
the
Murray.
height and everything is low. You will not see this from the street. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This is to the interior of the lot and behind the main house. And
So
this
when
actually
I'm
is,
driving on Mission and I'm looking over there, I'm not seeing any of that roof and this all that. Other than when you drive up, there's a driveway on the side.
if you were driving up the driveway or if you parked and looked sideways, you might see it. And actually, this whole exercise reduced the height slightly, but not maybe like 18 inches or so from the last time.
Thank you.
You had to explain that last time you were here.
Thank you.
I believe. Have any questions? No questions. Comments? Mr. Drury?
Well, I think it's much simpler, and I think it doesn't take away from the main house either. And just, I do have a question. I'm just, when I look at these, the south elevation is facing State Street. Yes?
No.
The 3 driveway bays face exactly opposite Mission Street.
So they face
Okay, all right. Okay, so you're looking, okay, it faces Pedricosa. All right, thank you. No, I like the design. Thank you.
I think it's much simplified and more diminutive to the main house, and that's really what we asked for. So I have no further comment than that.
Ms. Murray?
No additional comments. I wasn't here
Mr.
last
Lavoy?
time. So.
I find it really awkward still.
Ms. Arias?
You said this was an office or accessory space. What is it?
It's an accessory space that could be used as an office. I think Rob, who's going to live at the property, may use this as his office. But it's basically a wide open room. It has a powder room at the minimum dimensions for a sink and a toilet, which also has it's also got an exterior entrance to it so that gardeners can use it.
Okay. Well, I just remind you it's E1 zoning, which is single family.
Mr. Winnick?
Well, I share Mr. Lavoie's comment that it's awkward. I'm okay with the south elevation. I was trying to grapple with the west elevation. I'm thinking, I don't know the total answer. I mean, I understand that the unbalanced. I'm thinking, just looking at some of the detailing, though, I don't quite understand why the corbels are on the sides of the building. I'm thinking maybe where they're sticking at the back, I'm thinking maybe they should be sitting under the overhang. Sorry, I've scribbled on your drawings. So I'm thinking maybe I would suggest double checking your detailing on where your corbels are. I think the scale of the project's compatible. I just think the detailing needs some more work.
Well, I did that to. We've got a 2-foot overhang there, so the corbels are actually holding up that overhang, that rake overhang. That's why the corbels are there. We wanted to simplify it instead of trying to. Before we had a whole gable, but it was half of it was flesh framed over the wall, so we didn't want to overcomplicate it by doing gables that were just holding up an overhang or a rake that was just wall thickness.
Okay, but anyway, I think the detailing needs some work, and I appreciate you mentioning that. Maybe you don't want to overhang as far. Who knows? But anyway, that's just. I mean, I think I could support. I think it's compatible with the neighborhood and the bulk of the original building, and I think the fact that it's simplified helps. But I do feel that the detailing is awkward.
Mr. Schellenberger?
Yeah, I guess I'll go back to a question. It looks like, you've clearly responded to the simplification request, and that's applauded. But I'm wondering, in the study of the design, if it was purely programmatic, or did you study detached garages of this era? In other words, finding historic examples of garages of this size to look to your massing and detailing? That's a question.
We did look at some, and we went with just a simplification of the existing structure. How I thought that they would have done this, and and unfortunately there aren't that many good examples that really apply to this type of scenario.
Maybe not locally, but maybe Pasadena or some of those areas that have similar architecture.
Like a carriage house.
Carriage house with chauffeur's quarters on top of the garage.
Those were the style.
Anyway, it was just maybe that Commissioner Winnick's comments about the detailing, maybe that's a place to look for the next step.
Mr. Chair, just one additional comment. I think, one of the things that might help the overall appearance of it, particularly the west elevation and the north elevation, would be to perhaps enclose the landing portion or the top portion of the stairway and not make it look so utilitarian. So just have the pickets on the descent or the ascent of that whole elevation. So enclose this with some shingles. Maybe bring the shingles up to the rail there. Give it some more importance, because that's one of the things I find so odd about this elevation here.
You see those homes and those styles.
And it doesn't have to be just one plane. It could kick out, and there could be a flare there. I mean, there's all kinds of... You're striking a balance between over-detailing it, because we ask you to simplify it and not compete with the existing residential structure. But there's just details that I think can kick this up a notch and make it still subservient enough.
And that would match how they did the sleeping porches originally on the house, the railing. Even though those are enclosed, this would look like those were before they had been enclosed.
They did have a flare on the bottom.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
May I
Mr.
make
Curry?
further comments? May I make a further
Yes,
comment?
of course.
Now that my justice clear. I think that the space between the overhang over the garage doors and these windows is awkward. These three windows, they look like they're resting right on top. It's I don't know if it's a period look, historically accurate. Yeah, it looks awkward. And I also think that the view on the north elevation of the overhang and these two corbels is also an awkward look. And I'm not sure how it can be rectified. I think that I would like to see personally just these big overhangs just taken away. I don't know if the commission agrees with me.
I don't think that you would really even see them there. They would be just like that, wouldn't they? Oh, no, you're right.
They couldn't be. They look like they're almost like a false front. It's very odd.
You're right.
Very strange.
Probably should go.
So anyway, that's like that. Is that what you're saying? Well, anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, well, to quickly sum up here, I've heard the word awkward maybe 20 times in the last 20 minutes. Regarding the detailing and the way the building bulks up, and concerning about the corbels, going even in the Upper East around the Mission, there are a lot of detached studios over garages and so forth. A lot of shingled structures that I recall seeing that maybe you could get some ideas from and take a look at. The windows sitting directly on top of the roof. Their large overhangs maybe are excessive. And so I would suggest a 2-week continuance.
Did you want to add anything about possibly your study enclosing the landing portion?
I would leave that up to them.
Okay.
That's a reasonable idea. Yeah.
So, do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion for two-week continuance.
So it's a 2-week continuance?
With those comments.
Is there a second?
Second by Drury.
Second by Winnick. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Motion carries and Murray abstains.
We'll just keep one.
We're waiting for one more applicant.
Because you weren't here last week, 2 weeks ago.
No,
It's only comments. You can.
We'll keep still waiting.
As long as it's just for future, so you know, when it's under comment, if it wasn't given design review before as an approval, you can weigh in.
What time is the?
Well, just so you know, yeah, you can. Because otherwise, you're going to start taking yourself out of the loop when it comes back again.
Meeting is adjourned.
Oh.